The maintenance corridor of Orbital Station 7 was quiet except for the occasional drip of condensation and the soft whirring of air recyclers. This was where Vex lived now, not in the assigned quarters for visiting species, not in the commercial district where merchants and travelers mingled, but in the forgotten spaces between walls where only repair drones were meant to go. Vex's six-fingered hand reached up to adjust the hood that concealed most of their pale blue face. The station's residents feared the drift. Everyone did. The collective species was known for its cold logic, advanced technology, and complete lack of mercy. What they didn't know was that Vex was no longer part of that collective. Defective unit, the Drift Overseer had called Vex before abandoning them here 3 cycles ago, experiencing emotional irregularities, unsuitable for collective function. In Drift society, there was no greater shame than emotion. Logic was everything. Efficiency was everything. Vex had tried to hide the strange feelings that had begun to develop: curiosity, loneliness, even occasional happiness when discovering new things. But the neural scans had revealed the truth. Vex was broken, unwanted. A distant announcement echoed through the station's public address system. Vex's sensitive hearing picked it up even through the walls. Attention all station residents and visitors. A human vessel has been cleared for docking in Bay 12. This marks the first human delegation to Orbital Station 7. All security personnel report to docking level. Humans. Vex had only heard stories about them. A young species that had somehow developed faster than light travel despite still experiencing the full range of primitive emotions. Some called them dangerous. Others called them fascinating. The Drift called them inefficient and illogical. Curiosity, that troublesome emotion, sparked in Vex's mind. Perhaps they could observe these humans from a distance. After all, they were both outsiders here. Vex moved silently through the maintenance tunnels, following routes memorized during lonely exploration. A small panel near Docking Bay 12 provided the perfect viewpoint, a ventilation grate that looked down on the arrival area. The airlock doors slid open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Vex watched as they walked in. 5 humans of varying heights and skin colors, but all with the same basic form. They looked so much like many other bipedal species, yet somehow different. Their movements were less precise, more fluid. They smiled and gestured as they talked. The station's security chief, a bulky 4-armed Krex, approached them with obvious disdain. "Captain Tom of Earth Vessel Horizon," he rumbled. One of the humans stepped forward. He was not the tallest or largest, but the others seemed to naturally position themselves around him. "That's me. We're pleased to be welcomed to Orbital Station 7. "Welcome is a strong word," the security chief said. "Your berthing fee will be 4,000 credits, plus an additional 2,000 for special security considerations." Vex's eyes narrowed. The standard fee was 2,500 credits. The Krex was trying to cheat these newcomers. Captain Tom frowned. "That seems high. Our briefing indicated standard fees off." "Humans are unknown entities," the Krex interrupted. "Unknown means risk. Risk means higher fees. Vex shouldn't get involved. Drawing attention was dangerous. And yet, before rational thought could stop them, Vex had moved to another panel and slipped out into a service corridor that opened near the docking bay. Keeping to the shadows, they approached just close enough to be heard. Station Regulation 45B prohibits security surcharges without oversight approval, Vex said loudly, voice echoing from the shadows. Standard berthing fee is 2,500 credits for vessels under 200 meters. The Krex security chief spun around, all 4 hands reaching for his weapons. "Who's there? Show yourself." Vex remained hidden but continued. Regulation violation carries penalty of 2 cycles pay reduction. Captain Tom looked toward the shadows, a curious expression on his face. "Sounds like we have a friend who knows the rules." The Krex growled but lowered his hands. "Fine. 2,500 credits. Pay and get your humans out of my docking bay." As the transaction completed, Vex slipped back into the maintenance tunnel, but not before catching the human captain's eyes searching the shadows, a strange expression on his face, something Vex had rarely seen directed at them. It looked like gratitude. 3 days had passed since the humans arrived on Orbital Station 7. Vex watched them from the shadows, studying their behaviors. Unlike other species who kept to themselves, the humans sought interaction. They asked questions, laughed often, and seemed genuinely interested in other life forms. It was puzzling. Captain Tom, in particular, fascinated Vex. He led with a quiet confidence that didn't demand attention yet naturally received it. Vex had observed him successfully negotiate trade agreements with 2 different merchant guilds, something that usually took weeks of formal protocols. Today, Vex followed the captain to the station's central market. The large circular space buzzed with activity as traders from a dozen worlds displayed their goods. Tom walked alone, his crew busy with ship repairs. "You've been following me," Tom said suddenly, not turning around. Vex froze. How had the human detected them? Drift stealth techniques were supposed to be flawless. "I don't mind," Tom continued, still browsing a display of navigation equipment. "I figure you have your reasons. You're the one who helped us at the docking bay, aren't you?" After a moment of hesitation, Vex stepped from behind a tall storage container. "Yes." Tom turned, finally looking at Vex. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Vex's pale blue skin and 6-fingered hands, but he showed none of the fear most species exhibited when facing a drift. "I wanted to thank you," Tom said. "I'm Tom Chen, captain of the Horizon." "I know who you are," Vex replied. Their voice sounded strange even to themselves. It had been so long since they'd spoken directly to another being. A group of station residents passing nearby noticed Vex and quickly moved away, whispering warnings to each other. Vex pulled their hood lower. "They seem afraid of you," Tom observed. "They fear all drift." "And are you?" "Drift, I mean." Vex hesitated. "I was. The collective no longer acknowledges me." Tom's expression shifted to one Vex couldn't interpret. "Well, I'm acknowledging you now. Do you have a name?" "Designation Vex 427. "Vex. I like it," Tom said with a smile. "Would you join me for a meal, Vex? I'd like to learn more about the station from someone who knows its true workings." Before Vex could answer, the market's peace shattered. 3 station security officers, led by the same Krex chief from the docking bay, surrounded them. "Step away from the drift, human," the chief ordered, weapon drawn. "This unit is unauthorized to be in public areas." Tom didn't move. "We're just having a conversation." "The drift are dangerous," the Krex insisted. "This one has been hiding in the station's maintenance systems for months, probably sabotaging operations." "I have damaged nothing," Vex said quietly. The chief stepped closer. "All drift are required to register with station security. This one hasn't. Therefore, it's illegal." Tom's posture changed subtly. Vex noticed his weight shift, his hands open at his sides. A combat-ready stance disguised as casual. "Perhaps I can help resolve this," Tom said. "As an official representative of Earth, I'm claiming diplomatic privilege to register this individual as a consultant to our mission." The security chief's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "You can't do that." "Station Regulation 32C," Tom said smoothly. "Foreign delegations may register specialists under diplomatic protection. I have the authority codes right here." He held up his communication device. The Krex stared at the device, then at Tom, then at Vex. Finally, he growled and holstered his weapon. "Fine. Your responsibility then, human. When it kills you in your sleep, don't expect station assistance." After they left, Vex turned to Tom. "Why did you do that?" Tom shrugged. "You helped me. I helped you. That's how humans operate." The drift would call that inefficient. And what would Vex call it? Vex considered the question. The strange feeling in their chest had a name. one they had only recently learned to identify. I believe I would call it kindness. Tom smiled. So, about that meal. For the first time in months, Vex stepped fully into the light and followed someone who actually wanted their company. The human ship Horizon looked different from any vessel Vex had ever seen. Where drift ships were perfect geometric shapes with no wasted space, the Horizon had curves and unexpected angles. Its engine room, where Vex now stood beside Captain Tom, was a maze of pipes, cables, and blinking control panels. "This is Jack, my chief engineer," Tom said, gesturing to a shorter human with dark skin and hands stained with engine grease. Jack looked at Vex with open suspicion. "So this is your new friend, the one everyone's afraid of." "This is Vex," Tom corrected. "And yes." Jack wiped his hands on a cloth. "No offense, but I've heard stories about the drift. How they strip mine planets and calculate value only in resources." Vex nodded. "Those stories are accurate." "Not making me feel better here," Jack muttered. Tom stepped between them. "The engine stabilizer is still malfunctioning." "Can you explain the problem?" "Jack." The engineer pointed to a large cylindrical component. "The quantum field isn't aligning properly. We've tried recalibrating 3 times, but it keeps slipping out of sync. Without it, we're stuck here." Vex moved closer to the engine, studying its design. "May I?" they asked, gesturing to a nearby diagnostic panel. Jack looked at Tom, who nodded. With reluctance, Jack stepped aside. Vex's 6 fingers moved quickly across the controls. Data scrolled rapidly on the screen. "Your quantum field is experiencing micro-fluctuations due to the station's radiation signature. It's unusual but not unfixable. We checked for external interference." Jack protested. "Not at the subatomic level," Vex replied. "Drift technology operates on principles that—" They stopped, remembering humans preferred simpler explanations. "The station's power core is humming at a frequency that makes your engine uncomfortable." Tom smiled at the explanation. "Can you help us fix it?" "Yes, I would need to modify your field generator to filter out the specific frequency." Vex paused. "But I would require access to your ship's systems." The room grew quiet. Giving a drift access to a ship's core systems was something few species would consider. Jack shook his head. "Captain, that's crazy." "No offense," he added to Vex. "Why would I sabotage a ship that's protecting me?" Vex asked logically. "Trust works both ways," Tom said after a moment. "Vex helped us once with no benefit to themselves. I'm willing to trust again." He turned to Vex. "What do you need?" 2 hours later, Vex was deep in the ship's maintenance crawl space, carefully adjusting the quantum stabilizer while Jack watched from below, monitoring readings on a portable device. "That's actually working," Jack said with surprise. "The field is stabilizing." Vex continued their adjustments. The Drift Collective wouldn't approve of this modification. It's inefficient by their standards. "But it works," Jack pointed out. "Yes, that is why I was considered defective. I would suggest solutions based on what worked rather than what was most logical according to established principles." Jack was quiet for a moment. "You know, that's basically the history of human engineering. We've rarely done things the right way, just the way that works." Vex emerged from the crawl space, their pale face smudged with grease. "Perhaps that is why the collective fears humans. You succeed despite your inefficiency. Or because of it," Tom said, entering the engine room. "How are we looking?" "Field stabilizer is at 94% and climbing," Jack reported, a new respect in his voice. "Vex fixed in 2 hours what would have taken us days." Tom smiled. "Good work, both of you." Later, as they left the engine room, Tom stopped in an empty corridor. "The ship will be ready to depart in 3 days. When we leave, I'd like you to consider coming with us." "Vex." Vex tilted their head. "Why?" "Because you're good at solving problems. Because you see things differently." Tom paused, and because nobody should be alone just for being different. Vex felt that strange sensation again, a warmth spreading through their chest that the drift would consider a malfunction, but humans might call something else entirely. "I will consider it," Vex said quietly. For the first time since being abandoned, Vex allowed themselves to imagine a future beyond survival. The next 2 days aboard the Horizon changed everything for Vex. Instead of hiding in shadows, they walked openly through the ship's corridors. Instead of silence, there was conversation. The human crew, following their captain's example, had begun to accept Vex's presence. Jack, the engineer who had been so suspicious at first, now called for Vex whenever he faced a difficult problem. They worked side by side, Jack explaining human engineering techniques, while Vex shared simplified versions of drift technology. "You know," Jack said as they calibrated the navigation system, "you explain things differently than other drift I've heard about." "How so?" Vex asked, adjusting a sensor array. "Well, for one thing, you use metaphors. Yesterday you said the power coupling was tired and needed to rest. That's not very drift-like." Vex's hands paused. "That was why I was rejected. My neural patterns began forming connections between concepts that should remain separate. The collective called it contaminated thinking." Jack handed Vex another tool. "Humans call it creativity. It's how we solve our hardest problems." Later that day, Vex sat in the ship's small dining area. A crew member named Leia had convinced them to try something called ice cream. The cold, sweet substance was a strange new experience, pleasant in a way that made no logical sense. "You're smiling," Tom observed, sitting down across from Vex. "I didn't know drift could smile." Vex touched their face, surprised. "We don't. At least, we shouldn't." Tom leaned forward. "What made you different, Vex? Were you always like this?" "No, I was perfect once." Vex set down the spoon. 3 cycles ago, my unit was cataloging artifacts from an abandoned planet. I found a device, a simple thing that projected images when activated. The images were of the planet's former inhabitants. They were playing, dancing, holding each other. Art, Tom suggested, or maybe recordings of memories. Whatever it was, it changed something in me. I began to feel, to wonder, to question orders. Vex looked down. "The collective tried to repair me 3 times before abandoning me as defective." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Where I come from, we have a saying. The crack is how the light gets in. Sometimes our broken places let in something new." Before Vex could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Red lights flashed in the corridor. "Captain to the bridge," a voice called over the communication system. Tom and Vex rushed to the command center. On the main screen was an image that made Vex freeze. A sleek, perfectly symmetrical vessel approaching the station. "Drift ship," Vex whispered. "Enforcer class." The communications officer turned to Tom. "Captain, we're receiving a message from the station administrator. The drift vessel is demanding we turn over a stolen unit they claim is aboard our ship." All eyes turned to Vex. "How did they find me?" Vex's voice had a tremor that hadn't been there before. A crew member at another station spoke up. "Sir, I'm detecting a transmission that originated from the security office on the station. They reported our diplomatic consultant to the drift authorities." Tom's expression hardened. "Options. We could claim we don't have any drift aboard," Jack suggested, now standing protectively near Vex. "They will scan the ship," Vex said. "They will find me. And then they will recycle me for parts." Tom shook his head. "Nobody's getting recycled on my watch." He turned to his crew. "Accelerate our departure preparations. I want to be ready to leave in 6 hours." "The drift won't let you leave with me," Vex said quietly. Tom looked at Vex with something new in his eyes. Not just kindness now, but determination. "They'll have to go through me first," he said, "and humans can be surprisingly stubborn when protecting one of our own." "One of our own." The words echoed in Vex's mind, creating a sensation they had no name for: belonging. The Drift Enforcer vessel loomed outside the viewport, its perfect geometric shape gleaming against the backdrop of stars. Inside the horizon, the crew moved with quiet urgency, preparing for an emergency departure. "They've established a tractor lock on the station," Jack reported from his console. "No ships can leave without their clearance." Tom paced the bridge, thinking, "How long until we're ready to go?" "Engine systems at 92%, Jack replied. "But it doesn't matter if we can't break the tractor lock." Vex stood in the corner of the bridge, hood pulled low. "You should give me to them," they said quietly. "The drift won't harm humans over a defective unit, but they will if you resist." "Not happening," Tom said firmly. The communication system chimed. "Incoming transmission from the station administrator," the communications officer announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing the station's HFY administrator. His 4 arms were crossed nervously across his chest. "Captain Tom," he rumbled, "the Drift Enforcer Command has ordered all ships locked down until the stolen unit is returned." "There is no stolen unit on my ship," Tom replied calmly. "Only a diplomatic consultant registered under Earth protocol." The HFY administrator's face darkened. "Don't play games, human. The Drift have sent boarding parties to every ship in the station. They will reach yours in approximately 1 hour." The screen went blank. 1 hour, Tom muttered. He turned to his crew. "Ideas, people." "We fight," suggested Laia from weapons control. Jack shook his head. "Against a Drift Enforcer. We be atomized." While the humans debated, Vex moved to a nearby console and began entering calculations. The logic was clear. There was only one solution that ensured the human safety. Vex had expected to be alone forever. These few days of acceptance had been more than they could have hoped for. "I have a plan," Vex announced, interrupting the debate. "I will surrender to the Drift." "I already rejected that plan," Tom said firmly. "Not simply surrender," Vex clarified. "I will go with specific data that will occupy the enforcement unit's processing capabilities." Tom moved closer to Vex. "What data?" "Evidence of my value," Vex replied. "The engine modifications I created for your ship combine drift precision with human creative problem-solving. The resulting efficiency gain is 18.7% above drift standard protocols." Jack's eyes widened. "You're going to try to convince the Drift you're not defective, but upgraded?" "Yes," Vex said. "It is a small probability of success, but greater than violent resistance." "And if they don't accept your evidence?" Tom asked quietly. Vex met his gaze directly. "Then I will be recycled. But you will be safe." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Finally, Tom shook his head. "We need a better plan." He turned to Jack. "What if we reversed the quantum field stabilizer? Could we disrupt the tractor lock?" Jack considered. "Maybe, but it would fry our engines in the process." "I have an alternative suggestion," Vex said hesitantly. "One that is not entirely logical." Tom smiled slightly. "Those are my favorite kind. The Drift Enforcer will send 3 units to inspect your ship. Their primary function is to identify unauthorized technology." Vex looked around at the crew. "What if, instead of hiding me, you presented me as a technological collaboration? Not as a defective unit, but as a joint research project between humans and Drift." "A bluff?" Leah asked. "A demonstration," Vex corrected. "The engine modifications are real. The efficiency gains are real." Tom's face broke into a wide grin. "We don't run, and we don't surrender. We show them exactly what makes you valuable." He clapped Vex on the shoulder. "It's just crazy enough to work." "It is highly improbable," Vex admitted. "Then it's a good thing you're not entirely logical anymore," Tom replied. "Because humans specialize in beating improbable odds." For the first time, Vex felt something like hope, not just for survival, but for a future where they might be valued for exactly what they were. The three drift inspectors moved through the horizon with mechanical precision. Each was identical, tall, blue-skinned figures with six-fingered hands and expressionless faces. They scanned every room with cold efficiency, saying nothing to the human crew who watched them nervously. Vex stood in the engine room beside Tom and Jack, waiting. They had removed their hood, standing tall despite the fear coursing through their system. When the inspectors entered the engine room, they froze at the sight of Vex. "Defective unit Vex 427, stated the lead inspector in the flat tone of the collective. You will return for recycling." Tom stepped forward. "Actually, unit Vex 427 is currently engaged in a joint research project with Earth authorities." The inspector's eyes shifted to Tom, then back to Vex. "Explain." "Show them," Tom said to Vex with an encouraging nod. Vex moved to the engine control panel and brought up a display of the modified quantum field stabilizer. This engine component has been redesigned using a hybrid approach that incorporates human adaptive engineering principles within drift precision frameworks. The inspectors moved closer, scanning the display with their data readers. "The design parameters deviate from collective standards," observed one inspector. "Yet the efficiency metrics exceed collective benchmarks by 18.7%, added another, a faint note of confusion in its voice. The lead inspector turned to Vex. "This result is not possible. The collective has optimized all engineering protocols to maximum efficiency." "Maximum efficiency within established parameters," Vex corrected. "Humans suggested that certain parameters could be questioned." Tom joined them at the display. "Our species approaches problems differently. We often find solutions by breaking rules rather than following them." The lead inspector's eyes narrowed. "Breaking rules is inefficient." "Not always," Vex said. "Observe." Vex activated the engine system at half power. The quantum field stabilizer hummed to life, its energy signature displayed on the monitoring screens. All three inspectors watched as the efficiency ratings climbed beyond standard drift metrics. "This requires analysis," the lead inspector said slowly. As they studied the readings, Jack quietly moved beside Tom. "Something's happening to them," he whispered. "Look at their eyes." Tom observed the inspectors carefully. Their usual blank expressions had subtly changed. They seemed curious. "I have a question," one of the inspectors said suddenly. The other two looked at it sharply, as if surprised by the unauthorized speech. "You may ask," Vex replied. "Why did you choose to modify rather than replace the human technology?" Before Vex could answer, Tom spoke up. "Because better doesn't always mean different. Sometimes it means finding value in what already exists and improving it." The three inspectors looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Then, to everyone's surprise, they huddled together and began speaking in low tones. "Are they discussing something?" Jack asked incredulously. "I thought the drift operated on consensus." "They do," Vex said, equally confused. After a moment, the lead inspector turned back to them. "We have reached a local decision. This requires higher evaluation. Unit Vex 427 will present these findings to the Drift Command directly." Vex stiffened. "I will be recycled." "Negative," the inspector replied. "You will be evaluated as a potential evolutionary adaptation." The room fell silent. "What does that mean?" Tom asked cautiously. The inspector's voice changed slightly, taking on an unusual quality. Hesitation. "The collective has encountered difficulties in recent cycles. Problem-solving efficiency has decreased by 4.2% despite increased computational resources. Some have theorized that we have reached an evolutionary plateau." "And Vex might represent a new direction," Tom suggested. "This possibility must be explored," the inspector confirmed. "Unit Vex 427 will return with us to present evidence." Vex looked at Tom, uncertainty clear in their eyes. Tom stepped closer to the inspectors. "I'll be accompanying Unit Vex 427 as Earth's representative. This is a joint project, after all. The inspectors conferred again briefly. Acceptable, the lead one finally stated. Prepare for departure in 2 hours. After they left, Vex turned to Tom. You don't need to come. It could be dangerous. Tom smiled. Probably, but I'm not letting you face this alone. Why? Vex asked. Because that's what friends do, Tom replied simply. They stand with you when you face your fears. Vex processed this new concept, friendship, and found that it created the strongest emotional response yet. Not just acceptance, but something deeper and more profound. For the first time, Vex truly understood what made humans different, and why that difference mattered. The Drift Command Center was exactly as Vex remembered. A vast spherical chamber with thousands of identical units connected to a central processing core. The walls pulsed with blue light, the collective's thoughts flowing visibly through the structure itself. Tom stood beside Vex, trying to hide his awe at the massive construction. They had traveled for 3 days aboard the Enforcer vessel to reach this hidden drift outpost. So this is home, Tom whispered. This was never home, Vex replied quietly. Just where I existed. A group of 5 drift commanders approached, distinguished only by small insignia on their otherwise identical uniforms. Their faces showed no reaction to Vex's return or to the human's presence. Unit Vex 427, the central commander stated. You were designated defective and abandoned. Explain your unauthorized activities. Vex stepped forward. I have discovered a new pathway for drift evolution through collaboration with humans. The commander's eyes narrowed slightly. Humans are inefficient, emotional, unpredictable. Yes, Vex agreed. And those traits have allowed them to solve problems the collective cannot. The chamber fell silent. Even the pulsing lights seemed to slow. Demonstrate, commanded another of the leaders. For the next hour, Vex and Tom presented their evidence. They showed the engine modifications, the efficiency gains, and finally, the most convincing proof, complex problem scenarios that drift protocols failed to solve, but that Vex's hybrid approach could navigate. The collective has optimized logic, Vex explained. But logic alone has limitations. Humans use intuition, creativity, and even emotions to find solutions outside established parameters. And you have acquired these capabilities? Asked a commander. Not fully, Vex admitted, but I have begun to integrate them with drift precision. The results exceed either approach alone. The commanders conferred silently through their neural link. Tom shifted nervously beside Vex. They're taking a long time, he whispered. This challenges everything the collective believes, Vex explained. Finally, the central commander spoke. Our analysis confirms a troubling truth. The collective has reached an efficiency plateau. For 3 cycles, our problem-solving capabilities have declined despite increased resources. Your hybrid approach shows potential for breaking this pattern. Tom smiled, but Vex remained cautious. What is your decision regarding my status? You will not be recycled, the commander stated. You will be redesignated as Prototype 1 of a new adaptive class. Your function will be to develop integration protocols between drift precision and creative problem-solving. Vex stood perfectly still, processing this unexpected outcome. I am. Accepted. You are valuable, corrected the commander. Difference that improves the collective is not defective. It is evolution. Later, as they prepared to depart the command center, Tom found Vex staring out a viewport at the stars. So, you're not defective after all, Tom said, joining them. You're the future of your species. It appears so, Vex replied. They have requested I remain here to establish a new research division. Tom's smile faded. Oh, I understand. But I have declined, Vex continued. You? What? I have proposed an alternative. I will serve as ambassador between humans and drift, conducting research through practical application aboard your vessel. The commanders have agreed this provides optimal real-world testing conditions. Tom's face broke into a wide grin. You're coming back with us. If you will have me. Are you kidding? Jack would kill me if I left his new favorite engineer behind. Tom's expression grew more serious. But is that what you want, Vex? Vex considered the question. Once, they would have calculated the most logical choice. Now they allowed themselves to feel the answer. The Drift never wanted me as I was, Vex said slowly. Now they want me for what I can do for them. But you, Tom, you and your crew, wanted me simply as myself, even when I had nothing to offer. Tom placed a hand on Vex's shoulder. That's what friendship is. Then yes, I want to return with you. I believe I have much to learn about friendship, and perhaps belonging. As they walked toward the shuttle that would take them back to the horizon, Vex felt something they had never experienced in all their cycles among the Drift, a sense of coming home. Not to a place, but to people who saw value in difference, who wanted them not despite their uniqueness, but because of it.